All of a sudden, some Mechanicus adept comes flying onto the battlefield from orbit, screaming about how Imperial science is the finest in the galaxy.
Oh man, I'd love to see that.
No sense being coy with the intro, you already know what this video is going to be about. So for once in this channel's history, how about I just say my ultimate opinion right out of the gate? I like the Mechanicus a lot. Are there some grievances I have with them? Yeah, of course. But one of the things I like most about 40k is the setting.
Well, I mean, the Mechanicus are very, very cool. I too like them a lot, simply because of all their augmentations and the fact that they have a very unique position within the Imperium of Man. Slight curiosity, almost borderline heresy, but you know, nobody can really do anything about it.
And unlike many, many things in Warhammer, they aren't directly ripping too many things off. Sure, there's the hatred of AI that's pretty likely inspired by Dune, like much of 40k is, but if the idea of not just in computer...
Dune is a series that I know nothing about. I'm so sorry, I haven't gotten into that yet. I do know that there's like a movie, there's like also an upcoming MMO or game or something. I remember seeing something about it during like the Game Awards or the Summer whatever awards.
Is enough to say they're a ripoff, then I'm sorry to tell you this, but your grandparents are also probably ripping off of Dune. Their mannerisms and attitudes are, from what I can tell, not only fairly original, but something that embodies not only humanity in the setting, but also 40k as a whole very well. Very grim, very dark, and most of all, very, very weird. But how about instead of just going on about how I like them right away, I get into their history a bit more. Let's get past my own bias just a little bit and see if the Cogboys aren't the army for you. And even if they're not, you get to listen to the Mechanicus soundtrack for this video. That's always a good time.
Oh, hell yeah.
Before we
The Mechanicus soundtrack is incredible. And what I remember from Bricky's video on the Mechanicus from like a tabletop perspective, they were kind of a strange-ish army. They had their own weird play style. They do pretty good. I think they like hit on 3s or 2s or something like that. So they're pretty accurate, but it's just a different play style.
Again, I'd like to ask you something. Do you want to cook and eat delicious, nutritious food, but sometimes you just don't have the time to make it? If you're anything like roughly 100% of the people I know in my life, the answer to that is yes. In which case, you'd best listen up, because this video was sponsored by HelloFresh.
In the
Fall's a busy
meantime,
time of year.
go
There's
down
no doubt
to the
about it.
description.
Between
The
Halloween
very
and
top
Thanksgiving,
should be
you've
the
got
link
2
to this
major
video.
holidays back to
Give
back. If
Pancreas
you're
a
a
like and
student, the
sub.
finals are just around the corner.
Much respect
Well,
to the
then it's a
man
good
for
thing that with HelloFresh
all
recipes, they're
this
ready to go
lore
in 30 minutes
that
or
we're
less.
able to
With
learn
whatever's
from.
going on in your life, be it holiday shopping and preparation or a mad dash to get all your classes in order for finals, it's quick as can be to get yourself a HelloFresh meal cooked right up. They've even got step-by-step instructions, which is something I cannot emphasize enough.
Tasty.
I'll level with you here, I'm the kind of guy who could set cereal on fire. I'm not the best cook.
I never
And
really
even if
used
you're
any
like
of
me
these
in the
kind of
cooking department,
services,
you'll have no
so
problem figuring out
I'm not
making
too
one of
sure on the
HelloFresh's
quality of them.
delicious recipes.
I usually just
You know what
cook
else
all my own
HelloFresh
food.
makes easy for you? Eating
I
healthy,
eat
that's what.
hell
Aside
a
from the
lot.
fact that they're all good food, regardless of what
I
item
eat
you
a
order, there's
lot
options ranging
of
from
food.
vegetarian,
So,
pescatarian, as well as fit and
sometimes
wholesome meals
buying
to make sure
out
you're on
is
track to
just
hit your
not the
goals.
way
You
for
can
me.
even customize
I'd
your
go
meals as
bankrupt
well, which aside
super
from being
fast if I
super
did that.
convenient, means you can achieve peak fitness with exactly the kind of food you want.
So I
Add
just
protein
make
to a
my own stuff.
vegetarian meal,
Is
you
it good?
absolute mad
Probably
lad.
not.
HelloFresh supports it every step of the way. And before you start thinking something
thinking
insane
that
like
someday I
HelloFresh being
should,
just
like,
for dinners, it's
learn
not.
how to
Everything
cook
from breakfast to snacks to
much
even
better
dessert
than I
can be
currently
planned
do.
out for you, and you don't even have to look at
I
a
can make a
grocery store
steak,
any
but
time in the process. Your entire day's eating can be
anything
taken
apart
care
from
of
that
with
is questionable.
HelloFresh. If that's not convenient, I don't know what is. Before I go raid my fridge, because this sponsorship has made me hungry, if you click on the handy link located in both the pinned comment and description
showing
of
us
this video,
the
as well as use
cheesecakes
the
and the
code
lava
POG
cakes is
PancreasNoWork
not helping on my
you get
hunger
not only
either.
70% off your first order, but free shipping as well.
It's been a
I'm
while
bad at
since I
math,
had
and
one.
even I know this is an absolute steal. Start eating better and easier with HelloFresh today. Now then, let's get technical. Get it? See what I did there? Alright, fine, we'll get on with the video.
yeah.
To understand the Mechanicus, we must first go back in time. Many millennia before the
To
year
the main man
40,000, the
himself.
future god emperor of mankind locked a dragon inside of Mars. Moving on from that surely unimportant plot point, during humanity's golden age, now known as the Dark Age of Technology, mankind had not only colonized Mars, but terraformed it as well, like in pretty much every science fiction story. Then things went radically wrong, starting when the Men of Iron AI servants mankind had rebelled, and Mars went back to being an irradiated shithole. All that was habitable
Totally
on
not
Mars were
Terminator.
underground facilities and airtight domes. Starvation and other problems rapidly set in, and it was up to whatever technicians that survived to keep Mars from becoming completely uninhabitable. Over time, Martian culture changed because of all of this. Technology became an object of worship, and those with the know-how to work it became its priests. This religion also manifested the belief of an all-knowing god of technology, creatively known as the Machine God. He likes order, technology, and replacing your genitals with USB ports and/or sticks. Eventually, the God Emperor came a-knockin', and he was worshipped as an aspect of the Machine God that was known as the Omnissiah. The Omnissiah is also sometimes just what they call him, the Machine God, and sometimes he's something else entirely. And also, a lot of the tech priests don't actually believe the Emperor is the Omnissiah, but just roll with it to avoid any problems. This vagueness of what their belief truly is something you'll soon see as a running theme with the Mechanicus. Or should I say Mechanicum, because they weren't the Mechanicus quite yet, but I'll get to that later. For now, its influence spread across mankind with the Great Crusade, and as the Emperor's realm spread, so too did the Mechanicums, knowing that he
There is that point where I think there are some Mechanicus who have joined Chaos as well. Actually, I think you get to fight them if you buy the DLC for Mechanicus called Heretic. Fitting name. But that's probably that distinction there, right? They used to be Mechanicum, but now they call themselves Mechanicus because they didn't join the Chaos factions. Been a while since I saw Luton09's video on the Mechanicus, so a bit hazy here.
Needed the tech priests to help run his empire, he gave them a special exemption from the no religion rule that he created. This kept them happy enough, and they gave him the industry that he needed. Then the Horus Heresy broke out, and half the Mechanicum turned to Chaos alongside the Space Marine legions and the army. Mars was actually the center of a civil war that had fighting almost as fierce as it was on Terra when Horus invaded it. But unfortunately, that didn't really involve any Primarchs, so it obviously only deserved 1/20th of the attention Terra got. Daddy issues are clearly more interesting than science fiction robot priests duking it out on a Mad Max planet. After the Horus Heresy and eventual disappearance of all the Primarchs, two important things regarding the Mechanicum happened. One,
is this a screenshot from Gladius Relics of War? Is that the name of that game? I do own it, but I don't have any of the DLC for it, which seems to contain most of the content. Or maybe it's that weird Tacticus mobile game? Hope not.
they ate all of the other scientific organizations in the Imperium. There were a few kicking around beforehand, though of course not as influential as the Mechanicum, and they were swiftly absorbed into it and made to follow its doctrines. 2, it became the Adeptus Mechanicus we know and love today. It did so for reasons largely bureaucratic in nature. As the Mechanicum, it was technically a client empire of the Imperium as a whole, but with the imperial governance growing larger and larger and the Ecclesiarchate gaining more and more power as worship of the Emperor exploded across humanity, they wanted a way to put them on a more level playing field with the rest of the Imperium's organizations. And as technical outsiders, they wouldn't be able to do nearly what they could do as an official Adeptus organization. The Mechanicum also faced a bit of a loyalty conundrum while operating under this system. The various vassals the Mechanicum itself had weren't sure if they were supposed to be loyal to the Mechanicum directly or the larger Imperium first. Becoming an official Adeptus organization resolved both issues. Now they were a part of the Imperium of Man officially, so no need to worry about loyalty problems or other politicians doing some fuckery that they couldn't deal with due to their technical status as foreigners. Between this meaning that other Imperial politicians in turn had more direct say in Mechanicus affairs, and the Mechanicum ambassador marching a Titan in the Imperial Senate chambers to help negotiations proceed, the rest of the Imperial Senate was quick to go along with this as well. We finally have the Adeptus Mechanicus proper as it would come to be known. Also, holy shit, how big is the Imperial Senate they can fit a Titan in their meeting room? As for the rest of their history, the Mechanicus has one simple overarching goal: to find and understand technology that has been lost to humanity. And boy, is there a lot of it to find. Humanity's scientific prowess is both incredible and widespread across the galaxy, so the Mechanicus regularly sends fleets across space to find what mankind has lost.
There was something fun, I guess fun, you could say, from a reader's perspective, but definitely not for them, that I learned from the comments section. Apparently, the Mechanicus are kind of scared of any new technological advancement because of how easy it is to accidentally, potentially, end up summoning demons of the warp by, like, say, if a circuit board happens to create a particular pattern that ends up spelling out something that summons demons. It's not a good time in the 40k universe. Which is why, they kind of just stick to their knowledge that they know, while also having a little bit of, like, a few people who are very curious as to, like, what kind of Xenos technology they could use and adapt into their own. We see this split a lot in Mechanicus. Well, a lot. It's kind of the core mechanic of the game, where you either destroy all the Xenos technology or you salvage it and research it.
preserve what remains and make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Sometimes this means defending a Forge World from chaos or orcs until their dying breath. Sometimes this means skipping out and giving a guard regiment the equipment they need because you're a greedy bastard, and safeguarding ancient relics is a good excuse to have. Inventing new stuff is not really officially supported, but that just means you have to get creative with it. No, Mr. Fabricator General, I didn't invent this piece of technology. I found it in this laboratory. Pay no attention to the fact that it's a lab that I just built. I can assure you this is ancient technology. Granted, if you're that blatant with it, you're probably going to get lobotomized, but it's that kind of thing individual tech priests do to avoid getting in trouble. And some of the higher-ups are willing to allow this to different degrees as long as you're creative with your justifications, or just throw it in a dirt pile for a couple months so it looks really old, you know, whatever works. Creating AI is something that's usually never allowed, though. That doesn't stop some tech priests from still getting away with it. But usually that gets you insta-killed if you're found out. Humanity already had one AI rebellion in this setting, no one wants another one. They're the only people around in the Imperium if you want pretty much anything made. From weapons of war to more mundane things like transportation, the Mechanicus builds it all. They don't have a monopoly on technology, they have a monopoly on pretty much everything. For example, maybe they'll subcontract out the shipping to someone else, but the Mechanicus is the one who builds the truck the shipping company uses. If they don't do that, they make the parts that the company who builds the truck uses, or they maintain the merchant vessels that ship the materials
basically almost everything.
This gives them not only massive sway in imperial politics, but it means that their worlds can survive on their own if cut off from the Imperium at large for at least some amount of time. It also means that people like Inquisitors and Commissars have to be a lot more careful when dealing with the Mechanicus. If you accuse a Loco Magos of being a heretic, there's pretty decent odds that the nearest Imperial Guard regiment is going to be losing out on a few shipments of weapons if you were a bit too eager in your accusation. They're not withholding equipment from you, it's just production errors, they'll likely tell you. It can't be helped. For this reason, the Mechanicus is largely independent and polices itself. Sure, Inquisitors will still get involved, but they've got to be a lot more polite about it than with other organizations.
Being an Inquisitor's tough. You can't just go around being an asshole, even though, well, the depictions of Inquisitors that we've seen have kind of been that. But I'm sure there's varying spectrums of like good and bad when it comes to Inquisitors.
The rest of their lore can be integrated into their pros and cons, so how about I just start with that now? Like I said at the very beginning, the Mechanicus are very unique as far as 40k goes. I love my Eldar, but being honest, they're just elves in space. Sure, there's a lot of things that make them stand out, but at the end of the day, they're a race of aliens that are thin and lanky, have pointy ears, and do magic real good. Not hard to see where the inspiration for them comes from. Tech priests, meanwhile, are pretty unique with their worship of technology and almost fetishistic level with which they tear their own organs out to replace with RGB gaming keyboards and water coolers. So if you want your army to stand out, you can't go wrong with the Mechanicus. They've also got some of the best technology in the setting by far. In terms of who's got better tech than them, only the Necrons completely outclass them. Technically, the Leagues of Votann do now as well, but something to take note of is that both the Votann and the Mechanicus both draw from the same source, that being equipment from the Dark Age of technology. Sure, the Votann have much more widespread access to it, but the Mechanicus doubtlessly have some of their own equivalents stored away.
I basically know nothing about the, what did he call them? The Otan. I think they're space dwarves and they're kind of all like clones of a certain subset, or maybe they're like walking cyborgs, kind of ish. I just remember these details from like one or two comments from the first time I reacted to Ricky's video on all the factions explained. Maybe I should check out a lore video covering these guys, if there is any.
Somewhere. The Tau might have better stuff for the average person, but the higher-end Mechanicus stuff would blow away a Tau equivalent. Eldar tech is hard to compare because it's more magic than tech, but the Mechanicus can to some extent replicate what the Eldar can do. That being said, the Eldar do generally outclass the Mechanicus still. What? It may be the Mechanicus video, but I'm an Eldar fanboy. What do you want from me? Something I really appreciate about the Mechanicus as well is that they really showcase just how bizarre and downright awful humanity in this setting is. People tend to forget that in 40k, mankind is supposed to be no better than anyone else, including GW itself when they put out artwork that makes Gilman look like Jesus. The Adeptus Mechanicus, though? Just look at Call. Can you even call him human anymore? And while I might be drawing a bit for this point from what I saw in a Mandalore gaming video, look at the Mechanicus ship from the Deathwing video game. It's powered in part by a human being strapped to an engine that's also got two other human beings connected to it. And somehow I doubt they're feeling very good about their position in life right about now. They don't give a damn about their workers, and they regularly mess with the emotional centers of their brain to be quote-unquote more logical. Their mindset is so detached from not only our own morals, but that of other Imperials that they're in many ways just as alien as an Eldar or a Necron, sometimes more so. They rapidly throw away their humanity to become one with technology. They regularly lobotomize people because it makes for slightly more efficient workforces, Necrons. And if there's even the chance of finding some archaeotech from the Golden Age, they don't care how many people they gotta kill to get it. If you want a reminder that in 40k humanity is strange and very much not the good guys of the setting, then the Mechanicus are perfect for you. With that being said, you can fluff your Cogboy army to be as good as 40k morals allow. Tech priests can be motivated by genuinely altruistic desires, namely that of rebuilding mankind's technological and industrial base to what it once was. It's still Warhammer, and tech priests regularly screw each other with politicking if it suits them, to say nothing of how they treat other Imperials that don't have a gaming laptop jammed into their brain, but that just means that your army can be as good or evil as you want it to be. Again, you know, by 40k standards. To go
I remember this concept being covered in Luton 09's video. They're not like, hating the human form. I mean, the flesh is weak, but that I forget the full quote. I know that there's more to that, and it kind of changes the meaning when it's provided with that context. But I remember that a lot of their augmentations at first came from necessity, with their harsh living environment and like everything going to absolute shit over in their world, so they had to like survive underground and fight and all that. And so this has kind of become a part of their culture, I suppose. They found a way to make it work, and some people are good, some people are bad, that's just how it is.
A bit more into their dogma, you also have a huge amount of wiggle room for how exactly you want your Mechanicus army to view technology itself. They worship it and believe it to be divine, that much is set in stone. But even within canon itself, the specifics are often vague and left open to interpretation. For example, machine spirits. These are what the Imperium calls AI, and they're in pretty much every piece of technology. Of course, are machine spirits actual artificial intelligence with sapience and personality and such? Or are they merely the fragmented and corrupted remains of AI?
Knows?
Or are they not even real, and the procedures to please them are just the normal maintenance protocols we would have in the real world?
They just give you more damage.
Change your car's oil or run an antivirus software.
The
just with
Mechanicus
incense
anyways.
being added at every step. Or are machine spirits actual spirits who demand proper praise and adoration? Otherwise, your gun is going to misfire at the worst possible moment, and your Bane blade is going to go berserk because you didn't rub its joystick in just the way it likes it. Each of these possibilities are equally fair game for building your army, and all have their own appeals for how you want to view the 40k universe. Likewise, you can have an army run by maguses that fully believe the Emperor is an aspect of the machine god, or ones that deny such things and only go along with it to avoid the Imperium's wrath. All of these and more are all possible options for how you want to homebrew your Mechanicus army. They also have diverse mentalities and beliefs, to a point which I will get into in the con section. The video game Mechanicus is a perfect showcase of this. One tech priest is fanatical about following the Mechanicus' creeds, believing that alien technology truly is evil and that the Necrons should be destroyed entirely. Another is fanatical in the complete opposite direction. He thinks that Necron tech should be studied and replicated at all costs to advance humanity and the Mechanicus' power. Both of them are at different times shown to be in the right and the wrong, so fluffing your army in either direction or somewhere in the middle is perfectly valid either way. Another positive to take note of is the survivability of the Mechanicus. Without the tech priests, the Imperium cannot survive. It would lose access to pretty much all of its material resources beyond manpower, and when you take away guns from the Imperial Guard, you take away its usefulness. Throwing countless bodies at the Tyranids without giving them guns is a great way to feed a hive fleet. The Imperial Navy would waste away into nothingness, and even the Space Marines would find it hard to keep their stuff going. Except for the Salamanders, I guess, but that's one chapter that would have no problem surviving out of 1,000. The Mechanicus, meanwhile, might be able to survive.
I wonder why the Salamanders can just survive without the tech. I guess maybe they make their own tech, because I know they mostly use like flamethrowers and, well, anything heat related.
Independently. For the most part, they probably wouldn't be able to call upon the Guard and Marines to aid them in battle anymore, but they can make all the fancy toys and whatnot to keep themselves safe for at least some amount of time. They're also numerically strong enough to endure some pretty severe losses while being tough enough to be able to rely upon more than just numbers in a fight. So if you want a faction that's in zero danger of dying out, you want the Mechanicus. This also gives them a lot of sway within the Imperium itself, as I've mentioned before. No one wants to piss them off any more than necessary, because without them, you're not getting any weapons. This gives them a huge amount of leeway that no one else really has, not even the head priests of the Imperium. When you can take your ball and go home at any point you want, people will put up with your bullshit a bit longer than usual. Their models are also gorgeous. They're a newer addition as far as standalone armies go, so this does make sense. They not only look good, but distinct on the tabletop. And once again, they really drive home that feeling that humanity in 40k is fundamentally screwed up beyond belief. Look at this model and tell me a morally stable society would ever allow this thing to be created, let alone that this would be considered an ideal state of being for a human. But I digress. Their models are good, and that's really really all I have to say on the matter for now. There's another loaded statement for you to ponder over for the next few minutes. Oh, one last thing, they're also all plastic. That benefit alone makes them worth collecting more than some other armies. No resin for you if you go with the mech heads, hell yeah. Now, time for tabletop positives. First off, the Mechanicus are very mobile. Most of their army has either an 8-inch or 12-inch movement, which makes sense when you think about how they cut off their legs and replace it with motor-driven pistons. There's not a single Skitarii who's got to slow down because he's got a cramp in his leg, and that's not even counting all the units with the fly keyword that'll just zoom around the battlefield at will. They're also incredibly flexible as an army. I'd say they lean a bit more towards the shooty end of things than the stabby end, but you can always surprise your enemy by tossing some Sicarians at them, or Fulgurite Electro Priests. Aside from that name being awesome, they hit pretty damn hard in melee. Of course, ranged is still their strong suit, and while they only deal 1 damage a pop, at strength 4 and hitting on 3-ups, your basic Skitarii Ranger is going to be hitting more often than not, as well as pretty reliably wounding anything weaker than a Space Marine. If you want to lean into the monster side of things, throw Castellan robots into the fray. They aren't as tough as some other enemy monstrous units, but they're certainly tougher than most basic infantry. Combine that with the fact that they can fire in melee combat now due to being monstrous units, and they can really put the hurt on while taking a reasonable amount of damage in return. Plus, if you roll a 6, they explode when they go down, so that can always be a nice final middle finger to whoever took them out. Canticles and Doctrine Imperatives both help out in this department as well as being just some plain old nifty buffs. Canticles affect pretty much every unit that is in a Skitarii, while Doctrine Imperatives only help Skitarii. Each can
Does this mean that on the tabletop, the Canticles operate in pretty much the same way as they would in Mechanicus? Because right now, I'm imagining something similar to like the protocols for the Necrons, but for the Imperium of Man kind of form. Maybe you'd be able to use them like once per battle.
Only be used for a single battle round, but they go into effect instantly even if the opponent is going first, which both helps the flexibility of the Mechanicus as well as allows for some surprise tricks that can throw the opponent's game plan off kilter. Canticles just give straight up buffs, while the Imperatives also give a debuff to counteract the buff, but to be honest with you, the debuff really isn't worth worrying about in most instances. For instance, the Bulwark Imperative makes a unit move 3 inches slower, but buffs their armor save by 1. If they're already in a position to be opening fire though, odds are decent that you don't need to be moving them that much, so from my point of view, this is pretty much just a buff. Or the one that improves a unit's ability to hit in melee while debuffing their ability to hit a ranged attack. I don't think the flying Skitarii dual-wielding swords is going to care much about that. He just wants to stab. Lastly, pretty much every Mechanicus unit has either a 5 or 6 plus invulnerable save. Because of this, they can take a pretty surprising amount of fire before crumbling, though there's a flip side of this that you can probably guess at I'll get to later. But first, the lore cons. There's 2 possibilities for the Mechanicus regarding their collection of technology, both of which suck for different reasons. One is that they're genuinely losing more and more tech as time goes by and are fighting a losing battle to desperately keep mankind from going full caveman. The other is that they're hoarding all the best stuff and allowing everyone but themselves to go full caveman. If the former, then even the people in the Imperium with the best shot of fixing this mess can't do anything about it. If the latter, then the entire organization is filled with selfish assholes that can't comprehend the idea of sharing something even if it would help everyone in the long run. Well, yes, there are instances where the Mechanicus is legitimately in the right for hoarding away dangerous or unstable equipment. Just as frequently, they keep stuff for no other reason than to give themselves an advantage over the rest of the Imperium. Also, I said that the tech priests are diverse and wants and needs up to a point. I'm going to describe a tech priest character to you, see if you can guess who it is. It thinks that mankind is primitive compared to what it once was and that the Imperium's tech is woefully inadequate. It will do whatever it needs to in order to acquire lost technology. It worships machines, and it's generally very robotic in nature even when it does feel emotions. Can you name the tech priest I'm talking about? Probably, because I just described all of them. I just want a single tech priest that breaks this mold just a little bit. Because I fear I might not be clear enough on what I want, let me just be as blatant as possible. I want Rudel von Stroheim, the tech priest. Come on, tell me that wouldn't be a sight to see. Imagine some guardsmen and Tau are on a planet fighting over the latest sphere expansion. Things are tense and the Tau are poised to take over with their advanced weaponry and whatnot. All of a sudden, some Mechanicus adept comes flying onto the battlefield from orbit screaming about how Imperial science is the finest in the galaxy.
Oh man, I'd love to see that. Salute to von Stroheim, man. He was a real one.
Or he starts hip thrusting at the enemy and a bolter embedded in his chest rips the Tau to pieces. Tell me that wouldn't be the best goddamn thing to happen to the Mechanicus. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem very likely to happen, because aside from little quirks or views on things like AI each tech priest may have, their overarching goals and ideologies are pretty much carbon copies of one another. They're also rarely the protagonists of a story. This has changed more and more lately, such as with games like Mechanicus or Call Reviving Gilliman, but a tech priest is generally relegated to the supporting cast. So as much as the cyborg monks are kick-ass, they don't often get the spotlight in the setting. Even with Call, his shining accomplishments have been working on a project alongside Gilliman or bringing the blueberry bastard back to life. On a
I mean, you can kind of see them as the role of, like, I guess the blacksmith, essentially. The one who equips the hero with the weapons that they need. But it is a breath of fresh air when those people get to shine as well.
Similar note, the Mechanicus might not be in charge of technology, like even remotely. Remember that dragon I said the Emperor locked away in Mars? Yeah, it's a Catan, or at least a big shard of one, the Void Dragon specifically, the one who controls machines. Located on the capital planet of the faction that is obsessed with machines and lost technology. If that theory is true, and it is still really just a theory, and he gets out and is angry at the Mechanicus, they can kiss all their fancy equipment goodbye. In fact, he might be the machine god / Omnisci in disguise. The lore on this isn't 100% certain, just to be totally in the clear, but it's a distinct possibility given that the Necrons have launched suicide attacks on Mars in the past to get at something under the planet. Also,
ooh, I didn't know about that part with the Necrons. All I know was that the shard had a pretty big impact on the cults that formed during that time where they had to live underground and were at war with each other, which all kind of developed into their belief in the Omnisci and the machine spirits and whatnot.
on the topic of the machine god, as well as other things like machine spirits, it might not exist. There's been pretty much no lore on it doing anything, unlike any other godlike being in the setting. Even the Tau have that greater good spirit thing kicking around, but the machine god hasn't done jack shit. The same thing goes for the vagueness the Mechanicus has with the machine spirits and whether or not they're actually AI fragments, or straight up just spirits. On the one hand, this does create room for some really interesting debate and interpretations of the lore. Something like the machine god actually being some unbelievably powerful AI computer out there that would make Votan look pathetic. On the other hand, if you like having some actual clear-cut answers for your lore, then you won't get any here. And it also raises the possibility that the Mechanicus are the only faction in 40k who are entirely incorrect in their spiritual beliefs, which would be lame as hell. Also, if their god is actually just a Necron god, that would make them Warhammer 40k's equivalent of Bretonia, and I would have a fucking stroke. What else do I have?
Pancreas keeps dunking on Bretonia. I need to know why he does. I think he does have a video on Bretonia as something like why it's like the worst faction or whatever. So I'll check it out when I can. I need to know. He's referenced this so much.
Probably just nitpicking at this point. Oh yeah, I kinda wish that there'd be more of an emphasis on human-looking Mechanicus adepts. Theoretically, you could get your augmentations to be damn near indistinguishable from normal human features. And tech priests generally don't start off their careers completely covered in metal tentacles. But all we ever really see in lore are ones at the end of the process where they're more machine than man. It'd be really interesting to see a follower of the machine god at the other end of the spectrum.
I've seen plenty of fan art of Mechanicus who are, more human. Although Pancreas probably can't show any of that on YouTube.
Start of their career as a tech priest. The holy human form is something that 40k mankind is obsessed with, but the Cogboys wipe their ass with that notion, evidently. Alright, tabletop cons, what have we got here? First off, all of that flexibility and potential buffs that they have comes with a downside in that the Mechanicus is complicated as shit to play. Fitting, all things told, given that they're machine people, but still very complicated nonetheless. You will have to keep track of an absolute mountain of keywords, buffs, and unit statistics to make the most out of this army. It kind of reminds me of the Eldar, except instead of getting punished for misplacing a unit, you get punished because you didn't memorize an entire AP US history exam's worth of rules. Be sure to look at the rules thoroughly for this army, because you might just straight up not know that you can do something or miss out on a buff if you don't.
Yeah, there is that part about it. Like, whenever I play games, I enjoy the gameplay of it, rather than, like, the complex nature of, like, high skill cap units, I guess. I don't know if I explained that correctly. I'm going to go back to League of Legends terms, because, like, there was a time in my life where I played that game way too much. Thank goodness I don't anymore. But I enjoyed playing tanks, with simple rule sets that were able to do complex things the more you knew about, like, just the game plan and map awareness and strategy and whatnot. Versus, like, the heavy mechanic champions, where you could do a lot of animation canceling, and as long as you completely understood the champion and the enemy champion in and out, then you'd be able to, like, win pretty much any fight. I feel like the Mechanicus are more of that second thing rather than the first, more simple thing. I still really like their aesthetic. I'd probably go for Grey Knights still, though. Although I think they're not doing too well on the tabletop. I don't remember where I heard that from, but I think that's what's going on.
Mechanicals and Doctrine as being a once per game use also limits their effectiveness. Beyond the obvious drawback of you can only do each of them once, you need to make sure you time it right. Yeah. Otherwise you might find out that you could have absolutely cloned on your opponent if you just waited a turn or used them a turn earlier, and now you're caught with your pants down. You don't need to use either of them on any given turn, but that can still give you the problem of missing a major opportunity that you'll never get again. Giving the remaining Skitarii of a unit +1 to their armor save doesn't really do much when there's only 2 of them left standing. Speaking of saves, remember how they all have an invulnerable one? This is because with few exceptions, this army has absolutely no staying power apart from that save. Skitarii, for instance, are all toughness 3, so that invulnerable save isn't something that makes them broken. It's what they need to not get gunned down by every weapon in the game stronger than a las gun. Similarly, their leadership is bad. Morale is actually something you need to worry about with the Mechanicus, especially given their low toughness. And if you don't have the CP or right units to buff this problem away, you might find your battle line disintegrating after just a few hits. You might say that the Imperial Guard or other armies also have this problem, and to be fair, that's true, but the Guard are a true Horde army aside from their tanks. The Mechanicus can field an appreciable amount of models on the battlefield, but not enough like a proper Horde army where you can lose 20 models in a single turn and be able to confidently say that this doesn't affect your game plan in the slightest. Now this one is a big one, no Psychers or Psychic Defense. The only real option you have is if you use Forge World Graia's rule set for your army, and that requires both a command point spent and rolling above a 4 to nullify the psychic power. Otherwise, you have 2 options. You need to take allied Imperium Psyker models, or you just need to try and kill any Psychers before they can cast anything crucial. And depending on who you're up against, that may or may not be possible. Magnus isn't just going to lay down and let you table him on turn 2. This is related to 2 other problems. First one being, if you take allies, you don't get things like you don't get any Canicals. Even if you take Knights of the Cog, which are Imperial Knights allowed to benefit from Mechanicus buffs, you don't get Canicals, which is a damn shame because they're very helpful. The second, and much worse problem, is that the Mechanicus struggle with causing mortal wounds. Now on many units, if you roll a 6, you're going to cause mortal wounds for days. But let me ask you, do you really want to rely on rolling a 6 to carry the day for you? That is asking to be let down. I don't care.
I don't know what mortal wounds are. Maybe that's like, oh, this unit is just out of the battle. But I guess on the other point, like if you field allies, you can't use a Canticle. That's maybe because they don't like believe in the Omnissiah, and so the Canticles just don't apply. I think it would be nice if it like applied to at least your Mechanicus units and maybe not your ally units, but they can still do their own thing, right? But then again, maybe this video is just old and whatever new rule set that's come out, I think 10th edition, right? Maybe change some things around. But I don't think the Mechanicus were really a meta army. I've never heard any mention of them on the tabletop.
How many command points you blow on rerolls, how many dice you roll. If you rely on rolling a 6, you aren't getting one. Second to last problem with the Mechanicus is one that's as predictable as the sun rising in the morning, and that's the problem of money. Well, if you double down on Castellans and other vehicles and transports, they won't be the worst. If you want a varied and or competitive army, then you'll be shelling out some cash. The last problem is entirely to do with their models. Could you do me a favor and look at Call again for a moment? Tell me where to even begin to start painting this abomination.
Yeah.
You know what? Where do we even start assembling him? If your heart's set on collecting and playing the Mechanicus, I'd say that the biggest downside more than anything in their rules is you're going to be assembling and painting so many fiddly bits and tiny details.
It looks cool, it's very intricate, very advanced, but as somebody who's not skilled in art, I don't know how I'm going to do this. The end product would look hella cool though to like put on your shelf or display anywhere. But yeah, just to get there, that's a journey.
It's just... God, even if the assembling isn't that bad, painting basic Skitarii alone is a nightmare. You've got your nice flat robe to paint, and then congratulations, have fun differentiating 50 different varieties of tube. Someone really needs to tell Games Workshop designers that when creating a model, sometimes less is more. So there's the Mechanicus basics for you. If you enjoy fornicating with electrical sockets and being a greedy hoarder, there's no better army for you. Thank you as always to my wonderful channel members. You are the Archaeotech to my Mechanicus, filling me with wonder and awe at the power of the ancients. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to subscribe or become a member. Either way, thank you for watching and take care out there.
Alright, let's see what Pancreas has in store for us.
I need to continually remind myself that Among Us was not a thing before the Castellans were designed. Games Workshop did not rip off Among Us. There's no such thing as an imposter Castellan robot. They are most certainly not in my walls.
Why did he have to say it? I wasn't even thinking about it until he mentioned it.